Hi there. So I hope you had a good week. Now today, I'm about to drop a bombshell, and I don't know whether most of you are ready. All right. So some of you may have seen this news from the all over basically Western media, and from this newspaper, The Guardian, which is a British newspaper, uh, they say that ICC judges issue arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin of alleged war crimes. And they go ahead to say that the arrest warrant issued for the Russian leader and his children's rights commissioner for unlawful deportation of Ukrainian children. And in there, they are saying that basically Putin is being taken to this international criminal court for having abducted some 1,400 children from eastern Ukraine. But what I want to bring to your attention is this court, the International Criminal Court, because it has double standards. It is being used to go after cases that are politically basically instigated. Why do I say that? According to Russia, they said, and they laughed at the suggestion because they said that Russia is not party to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court and bears no obligations under it. In other words, what it means, we have what we call state party to the Rome Statute. These are countries that signed a certain document in 2002 to basically support this court and to allow this court have jurisdiction in those countries. In other words, if you are a member of the Rome Statute, for example, a country like Kenya, are a member of the state party to the Rome Statute, crimes committed by Kenyans or Kenyan soldiers, even in countries that are not state party to the Rome Statute, can be investigated by these courts. But if a country is not a state party to the Rome Statute, in the case of Russia or the United States, the crimes committed by their soldiers in any other country cannot be investigated by the ICC, which is this court. So why am I saying it's double standard? Israel is a state party to the Rome Statute. We know the kind of war crimes they commit in Palestine and Syria. They bomb airports with civilians, and sometimes a lot of people are hurt who are not part of the war. So ICC has never gone to Israel. ICC has never investigated the UK, Britain, because Britain is a state party to the Rome Statute. It is. But British soldiers committed crimes in Iraq when they invaded Iraq with the US, and this court has never investigated them. For example, let me show you an article that goes back some time back in 2016. So in this article, there was an inquiry by a certain judge in the UK, in the Britain, and he found that the former prime minister of Britain or the UK, Tony Blair, made mistakes, and the inquiry in short by Sir John Chilcot was that Tony Blair exaggerated the case for the war in Iraq. In other words, from the inquiry itself, he falsified satellite images, falsified reports, intelligence report to prove that there were nuclear sites in Iraq and Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. That report that he falsified, he presented it in front of members of parliament to argue out his case, because in the UK, for war to be, for that country to go to war, they have to be approved by the parliament itself. So members of parliament have to be told why they are going to war and they have to approve it. So this prime minister falsified information so that he can lie to the members of parliament so that they can go to war. The other thing he did was that there was no imminent threat from Saddam, but from what he presented as a report was that Saddam had intended or was planning to attack British citizens. And then when the British intelligence, that is the MI5 and sometime MI6, were asked, they said those reports did not come from them, so they were flawed information. So that inquiry found Tony Blair and his office lied to the British people for them to go to war. So as a result of that, 160,000 Iraqi civilians were killed as a result of this man lying. And most of them, or half of them, were killed by British soldiers and British bombs and British bombers. Those planes that drop bombs. And This is what he said. He said that he rejected the inquiry's finding, but he expressed sorrow, regret, and apology for the mistakes he made in planning the conflict. So just imagine, this man falsified information for him to go to war with the United States. But he comes here saying that he regrets and he apologizes. That's all. And the ICC is there without that information, thanks to this report by Sir John Chilcot. And instead of picking that report and doing their own investigation and taking this man to court because he comes from a country that is state party to the UK, they didn't do that. But today, they want to tell us that they want to take Putin, a president from a country that is not even state party to the Rome Statute, on behalf of another country, Ukraine, that is also not a state party to the Rome Statute. If you go to this website, the ICC website, you can find all that information. So Ukraine, Russia, they are not state parties. So I don't know why they are wasting time talking about that, when we have someone who should be taken to the ICC and they are not doing that. Now, the other thing you have to know is Paul Kagame, and this is where this whole thing was coming to. Rwanda is a state party to the Rome Statute. Paul Kagame, there is tons and tons of evidence to prove that Paul Kagame is directly responsible for the atrocities committed in Congo. But the ICC has never done anything to this man, and I will tell you why. So in 2012, this article was written in July 2012. Back then, Obama was the president of the United States, and he was not joking. So Rwanda, they told Paul Kagame that if he doesn't get out of Congo, they're going to take him to the ICC. So this is how the article went. Rwanda's Paul Kagame warned he may be charged with aiding war crimes. US tells President Kagame he could face prosecution for arming groups that carried out atrocities in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And that's how it went. So the head of the US War Crimes Office, so apparently US has this War Crimes Office, and US commits most of those war crimes anyway, or they are directly responsible. But anyway, that time he had warned Rwanda's leaders, including President Paul Kagame, that they could face prosecution at the ICC for arming groups responsible for the atrocities in the Democratic Republic of Congo. That he meant CNDP and later M23. That's what they meant. And back in 2012, the same head of that office at the time was called Stephen Rapp. He said that they could use the same method they used against Charles Taylor, who was the former president of Liberia. And to some of you who may not know Charles Taylor, is that when he was president of Liberia in early 90s, he was abetting, aiding, and arming a rebel group in Sierra Leone, and this rebel group would commit atrocities in Sierra Leone, and in return they would still smuggle diamonds from Sierra Leone. I don't know if you have watched movies about diamonds of Sierra Leone or even heard music, diamonds of Sierra Leone. So they would steal those diamonds and give them to Charles Taylor, and it is said he would give them to Margaret Thatcher. So there was the son of Margaret Thatcher, who was the former female prime minister of Britain in the 1992, was the one who would go to Liberia and get these diamonds. If you find out her relations with Charles Taylor, for example, there's tons and tons of evidence that there's this extra special relationship that Thatcher, Charles Taylor, and even the president of the US, Reagan, had. And they were basically, in a nutshell, Thatcher was getting her son was getting those diamonds from Charles Taylor, and then they would give Charles Taylor weapons to give to the rebels of Sierra Leone. So that's what happened. But guess what? This guy, Charles Taylor, was jailed, and as you can see from here, they're saying that it's widely held responsible for the country's devastating civil war. He's also charged for crimes committed during the civil war in neighboring Sierra Leone. And that's why he was jailed, because Liberia is a state party to the Rome Statute. So Charles Taylor was jailed for 50 years. He died before he could finish his sentence. So back to our guy, Paul Kagame. In 2012, when he was told that is what is going to happen to him, he quickly told the M23 to leave Congo. In 2012, they left. 6,000 M23 fighters with their guns, with their weapons and uniform, crossed from Congo into Rwanda in 2 days. 6,000. Can you imagine? Imagine of a stadium where there's a weekend football match. 6,000 men pouring out of that stadium with the uniform, guns and RPG, sorry. That's what happened. 6,000 M23 went to Rwanda. Everyone saw it. There's a lot of images to show that, because he was threatened. Fast forward to about 11 years later, 10 years later, Paul Kagame is back to Congo to do the same thing. But this time round, he's not scared of going to ICC. Why? Because Tony Blair, the same man, Tony Blair, who should be in the ICC, is the one protecting Paul Kagame and has assured Paul Kagame that he will not go to the ICC. And if you read this article here from the same newspaper, The Guardian, it says some letters written by people who are insiders, Tony Blair and his views on the intervention in Rwanda. So if you go down there from one of the letter, it is said that Kagame's government has paid for Tony Blair's African Governance Initiatives Consulting Services since 2008, which include Mr. Blair's personal advice to the president. As such, Mr. Blair does not write in a personal capacity, but rather as a spokesman for the Kagame government. Basically, what this means is that Tony Blair has this company, a briefcase company, meaning it doesn't even have an office. It's just there. It has a bank account and maybe a legal identity, but it doesn't have an office. It doesn't have an employee. The only employee it has is Tony Blair. And he sells protection and personal advice to dictators. And one of the dictator, his biggest client is Paul Kagame. So he called it African Governance Initiatives Consulting Services. No, quite a mouthful name for a company. And look, it is called African Governance. So it is specifically for African dictators. So now, since 2008, Kagame has been paying Tony Blair to ensure that he doesn't get investigated for crimes he does in Congo. He doesn't get taken to the ICC, and so on and so on. And since 2008, 2009 is when Rwanda was admitted to be a member of the Commonwealth. It was as a result of that consorting. And Rwanda was not colonized by the British, so it became a member of the Commonwealth. And you know what has been happening. That is what we call soft power. So Paul Kagame is spending a lot of money to clean his image out there, also to get protection from people who control such international courts. Because it's obvious, if the ICC, the current judge of the ICC, the chief judge is called Karim Khan, is a United Kingdom citizen, is a British citizen. He's being used to make jokes by saying that he's going to arrest Putin. How do you arrest someone where your court is not even, doesn't have jurisdiction? Because you told us the same thing when some people said you should investigate George W. Bush, and you said you don't have jurisdiction in the United States. So what has changed now that you were saying you can investigate the Russian leader? Do you now have jurisdiction here? You don't. So you see, that's why I'm saying most of this international thing is about politics and buying services from the likes of Tony Blair. If you pay this guy, you can basically go killing people everywhere and nothing will be done to you. And the other thing you need to notice is that the same ICC, now we have discovered that actually it is now controlled by Britain, because that's what it looks like. back in 1997, set up a special tribunal for Rwanda called ICTR. It was set up in Arusha, and it was used to basically investigate those who are responsible for the 1994 genocide. And when they opened a file to find out what could have started the genocide, which most people are saying that it was the shooting down of the presidential plane that was carrying the then president Juvenal Habyarimana. Paul Kagame, so a lot of witnesses came forward, and most of them were ready to testify that it was Paul Kagame who had ordered the shooting down of that plane. So in other words, he's the one who started the genocide. When they got to that file, Paul Kagame wrote a letter saying that Rwanda is satisfied with how far the ICTR have done the cases. So from now on, we are going to handle the remaining cases in our own country. That's what he said. So he said that they had this court called Gachacha. I'm going to show you. Some of you definitely, you are too busy making money and you don't read some of these things. So Gachacha courts, I think that's why. Yeah, here they are. So he said that they're going to basically have this communal courts where people who are suspected to have committed genocide are going to be charged in those courts. So the Gachacha courts were basically a community justice. So what would happen is that in your village where you're born, they would set up a chief and some few people from the judiciary. Then you'll be brought in front of them, and villagers will be there. And then they would ask someone who's accusing you of having seen you participating in those crimes, come forward and give his or her account, and then they would make a decision or a verdict. Most of the time, they were making 100% basically conviction or a verdict. And it turns out most people discovered that the Gachacha courts were used by the Tutsi community to disinherit or take property from the Hutus. And what happened was that, let's say you're a Hutu guy called George, right? And you have 10 acres of land, and then your neighbor is a Tutsi, maybe he doesn't have that kind of land, and he wants your land. So they would take them to these courts, and he would say that he saw you in 1994 with a group of youths who she cannot name, and you were directing those youths to homes owned by the Tutsis, and those youths would be basically commit those crimes. So the verdict would be you are guilty, and he is the victim, so she would be told to take all your property as a settlement, and then you'd be told you are not going to be taken to court. All you have to do is surrender your property. So that's what they did, and there's a lot of files that shows most people basically it was a setup. But the point is, the ICC or the ICTR, as it was called, was there to check these kind of crimes, but Paul Kagame refused when it started touching him and his people, because they started knowing, they want to find out that we are the ones who started this thing. So he shut it down. So you see, this is what it is. So go find time, go to the internet and try to find the information about it. Here it is.